Welcome to the Leadership Puzzle. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, co-founder of Evolve HR Solutions. In this project, we're taking a journey to uncover the mysteries of leadership with some of the world's most accomplished leaders. In each episode, we discover the distinct insight from each of these great leaders, enabling us to refine our leadership skills and become more effective leaders. Piece by piece, together, we will assemble the leadership puzzle. Hey, welcome to a next edition of the Leadership Puzzle. We're really glad that you chose to join us. Today, we have a special surprise. I'm the one that's going to actually be on the hot seat today, and our producer, Jeremy, is going to be grilling me with the questions. So the tables have turned. So I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy, and let's get started.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being here and talking about all these questions. So for the first little bit of the episode, we'll kind of carry on like normal, talk about your background and your leadership puzzle that you bring to the table. And then for the last portion of the interview, we're going to be asking, or I'm going to be asking questions from the audience that they've submitted for this particular episode. And so there'll be just, not quite the rapid fire of the lightning round, but it'll be, short and sweet questions from the audience that we'll get to ask you. So I'm sure people are going to look forward to that to see if there are questions being asked. But, we'll jump right into it.
Great.
And just kind of jump into these questions. So you started your career in manufacturing and now have ended up in HR. What prompted that shift over into HR?
If I think about my career, I actually went and in my undergrad, I actually got a double major of finance and management. And as I look back, I realized that most of the management courses were actually what would be labeled human resources courses right now. And so I guess I'm not really surprised that I ended up in human resources, but it was through a unique circumstances where I had been leading a IT team, and when that project was done, I was recruited into HR to run projects. And so I actually learned HR from the ground up through running global projects, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's awesome. So you've worked at some really incredible companies in your career, Intel and Kimberly Clark, to Sally Beauty, and, ending up at Alkegen before starting your own company, Evolve HR Solutions. Especially in a few of those countries, you spent a lot of time overseas. What were some of those key considerations that you had when developing a global HR strategy that accounted for really a diverse cultural and experiential backgrounds in terms of the environment?
I think the most important thing to understand was that as much as there was a strong global corporate culture, every country had its unique values and culture that needed to get adapted to. And so, fortunately, I was a third culture kid growing up. I spent my first 4 years in school in Mexico. I've always had that ability to go into a place and just intrinsically understand the cultural nuances that a country has, that a region has. Because let's face it, each part of the U.S. has a different underlying culture, and so it was really about learning how to adjust the global or the corporate objectives and the corporate culture and translate that into a culture that would be applicable and exciting for everyone to
Mm,
jump into.
nice. Do you have maybe a moment where you had to really filter those cultural expectations and channel that towards, achieving a goal, whether it's completing a project or, another goal you guys had?
Yeah, the story that I really like to share, and it was a real eye opener for me. So I had spent 6 years over in Asia. Of course, I had spent time in Mexico, had managed global teams. But when I was sent to Russia to lead with Kimberly Clark to lead the Central European and Eastern European region for HR, I found that the Russian culture was just unique enough. I thought, oh, I know European culture and I know Asian culture. It's smack dab in the middle of the two. It should be just fine. Well, I learned a valuable lesson that was not the case. I really simple. I asked someone for a relatively simple task. It wasn't anything exciting, and they wouldn't do it. And they just, oh wait, I'll get to it. And eventually I was talking to one of my employees who I'd become, had a good relationship with. And I said, what's going on? And he said, they're not afraid of you. And I'm like, I don't want them to be afraid of me. That's not good leadership. He said, but in Russia, sometimes they need to, fear that they respect that authority and that power that comes with that authority. I thought, oh my goodness. So I pulled everybody into a conference room, pounded on the table, and yelled. And I said, if this report isn't on my desk by Thursday, I'm going to fire someone. Uh, you know, I didn't really have the authority to fire it, given the labor laws, but they had never seen me get upset. And sure enough, the report was on my desk on Thursday, and it was a key learning. But it took me about 6-7 months to understand that unique nuance. That even though everyone loved my global leadership style, it didn't always translate into delivering the results that you need.
That's interesting. That was a great story. After decades of working in corporate setting that across all these different companies like we've talked about, you took the venture to start your own company in this last year, Evolve HR Solutions. What motivated you to start this company, and how do you differentiate your services in this, competitive HR advisory
Yeah,
and software market?
yeah. It was a, a scenario where just everything kind of came together in my role as chief talent officer. I had taken a sidestep to go lead a massive integration. We basically were merging two companies equal size, and that was taking full time, and I was really enjoying the integration aspects of the role. Well, and I was gearing up to lead a team to integrate 4 or 5 more acquisitions that the company was going after. Well, the capital markets dried up, and so I sat down with the CEO and I was like, okay, what's the options? And there really weren't any great options. I could have gone over to the CIO role, because I did have a stint in IT way back when I was at Intel. So that would have been interesting, but it wouldn't have been really where my heart was. And so I call up my now partner, Derek Lutz, and we start talking about what the market is looking like. And he says, "Hey, why don't we start a HR recruiting and consulting firm?" And that started that journey of really understanding the market. The HR recruiting, consulting, and software market combined is significant. And there's very few companies that have all three of those
Mm.
components that can provide those services to small and medium-sized businesses.
Mhm.
And so we really feel like we have a competitive advantage when coming into organizations that need something from a HR perspective, but just don't have it
Right.
internally.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing about that. I want to move now into your leadership puzzle piece and what makes you unique as a leader. Um, Over your career, you've built several different leadership or talent development programs. What elements do you believe are critical for a successful leadership development initiative?
The key for a leadership development is to understand where the leaders are and where the organization needs the leaders to be. And it could be, you know, they have leaders that are $10 million leaders, but they really need them to be $50 million leaders, or they need them to be $500 million leaders. And there are these thresholds within the leadership framework that the work just gets more complicated. And a leader that is effective in one level of the organization may not be effective when the organization gets bigger, more complex, and so that's really important to understand what that is. And so we do see a lot of private equity companies that are buying other companies and having these great leaders, but they're not thinking on the enterprise level. They may be more used to a mom and pop family style framework when they really need something a lot more structured. They need the discipline and leadership of larger teams, and they need to be thinking about the whole organization, not just their piece of it. And so those are some components that we always have to go in and really understand from a leadership uh, perspective. Probably probably one of the biggest gaps that I see with leaders today is, well, besides the fact that only 30% of leaders have had any kind of leadership training. A couple of major surveys have come out recently to say that. Accountability, really making sure that you're taking accountability for the decisions and for the success. Too many people are pointing fingers to why it didn't go wrong versus saying, stepping back and saying, hey, I something went wrong. I know I had a part in that, and here's the 5 things I'm going to go do to fix it. So accountability is a big one. And then for leaders today, resilience is so critical because the world has just turned upside down since COVID. So many things are happening to leaders, and they need to be taking that mental health and really rejuvenating themselves. And we've talked to some of our guests recently about
Right.
that. But those are 2 big aspects that executive leaders especially need to be aware of.
Yeah, that's amazing. A lot of times in training these leaders, they are being trained to set up their employees for success and to increase their employees' performance as well. And as a leader yourself, you've achieved really remarkable improvements in employee engagement scores throughout your career. What strategies do you find most effective when in boosting engagement for your employees?
I think it's really understanding what the employees are looking for, and every organization is going to be different. When I was in Japan, it was finding ways to build community, because in general the employees weren't really connecting at a more relationship based. It was really focused on the work. So we built things that events that would encourage broad based employee participation. We also did things like provide fresh fruit on Friday, because in Tokyo, fresh fruit was really expensive. So, it doesn't have to be super expensive, but it's those things that are going to make a difference and show the employee that management really cares. But what I found, uh, the best tool for engagement is actually leadership communication. Let me tell you a little story about COVID. So when COVID hit, we know that there was so much data, so many things were changing on a day-to-day basis, and employees were feeling that. I mean, certainly the world around them, but for employees, there was so much uncertainty within the company. They would see on the news that companies were laying off and furlough and all that stuff. So uh, we got our CEO to do a weekly 5-minute video. Just recorded it and we sent it out to everyone. We were doing quarterly pulse surveys just to get the temperature check of the
Mm-hmm.
employees' engagement. And when COVID happened, we were having to do some rolling furloughs and some of those creative things to kind of minimize or maximize our cash flow during really difficult times when sales weren't at peaks. And so we expected the pulse survey during those quarters to actually go
Right.
down, because there's just so much going on. But what we found is they
Mm.
went up. And the only thing that we really did differently was we had our CEO and other leaders communicating routinely, weekly, to the employee base, and that just felt it gave them that connection to the organization, that belief in the leadership that we were going to get through it. And so, a year later, our scores continue to stay
Mm.
high. A year later, the weekly videos slowed down, and all of a sudden, uh, so did
Mm.
the scores. And so it was a real tangible proof that employee communication above everything else is paramount
Mm.
if you really want an engaged
Wow,
workforce.
that's a great story. Yeah, that's very illuminating. FaceTime with a leader can increase engagement just if just by being present and available. We touched on this briefly, but managing talent on a global scale can really present unique challenges that someone on a national level wouldn't necessarily face. And you've been the head of HR over pretty large regions of the world, whether it's Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe. What's your approach to global talent management, and how do you ensure alignment across different regions while working with such large teams?
Well, it starts with respect for all the employees, and respect for their backgrounds and culture and experiences, which are different. Probably the biggest challenge is, for most of the world, English is a second language, and so I tended to find myself being the translator of folks who were speaking English, because they use different words in different languages.
Hmm.
Like in Malaysia, uh, uh, when we first got there, we were invited to a picnic. And in the US, a picnic generally happens at noontime, lunch, maybe an evening. But in Malaysia, because it got so hot, picnics were generally in the
Hmm.
morning. And so, same word, but a slightly different
Yeah.
definition. And so, respecting and understanding that there are going to be some
Hmm.
differences is the foundation
Yeah.
to it. And so, the key when dealing with talent management and looking at leaders across the world and figuring out who can be great leaders in other parts of the world is really helping them understand themselves, understand the culture, and understand their leadership capabilities. And there's some core foundations, and the ones that really understood some of the core foundations of good leadership principles, they could transcend their
Hmm.
own culture to be highly effective
Hmm.
globally.
Yeah, that's really cool. You've told me a story off air about an initiative you had in Asia to really unify the team to around a certain goal. Could you describe that initiative that you had?
Yeah, sure. When I first got to Asia, I was running HR operations for all of Asia. So had folks from all different countries: China, Philippines, India, Japan, Malaysia, and others. And at the time, the Lord of the Rings movies had just been released. I think they might have been on the second one at that point. Um, but that movie was kind of a snapshot of the same thing I was going into. So the Lord of the Rings, you had humans, you had elves, you had dwarves, you had hobbits, and I use that analogy that says, hey, we're on a quest to improve the operations across the region, and just like the movie, they're the Fellowship of the Ring was a group of individuals who were from different races. We had different backgrounds and coming from different cultures across the region, but our goal was still to be the best HR operations organization that we could be, and that really resonated with people. So leveraging that cultural phenomenon at the time really made a difference in bringing some cohesion among the team. So much so that some of them actually even started putting my face on Aragorn and as the leader,
That's
and we
awesome.
then made awards that represented the different leaders and the characteristics.
Mm.
And I even bought action figures. And when someone did something really great, I would give
That's
them an
great.
action figure as a form of trophy, as opposed to some little cheap plastic thing. So it was something that was meaningful to them because of what we're building as a shared
That's
organization.
great. That's a great story. What trends do you see shaping the HR field in the next few years, and how are you even at Evolve preparing to meet these challenges?
Well, I think the biggest trend that is facing HR and frankly business is what is AI going to do from a transformative perspective on the function. We'll just keep it to an HR, but it's applicable in finance and marketing and sales and everybody else on how the generative AI is really going to help us transform the business landscape. Now, I am not a doomsday person. AI is not a Terminator level event, because I see AI as nothing more than the next generation evolution of technology. Back when the internet was first created, folks were like, "Oh no, we're going to lose a bunch of jobs because of the internet." Or when Excel came out, you had a lot of finance people being scared that they were going to lose their job because they're not going to have their pencils and pads, and all it did was it up leveled
Right.
the work itself, and so the work transformed. I think AI is going to do the same thing. Yeah, it's going to automate a lot of the standard processes, and it's going to do some a lot of the tasks uh, that frankly a lot of folks just don't want to do, and so that's really awesome. Like, I'll use AI to write a job description, or at least a draft job description, and it saves me an hour of
Yeah.
my time, and so there's huge value in that. What it's not going to do is it's not going to change the need for that human interaction. It's not going to human intuition. So there's a lot of things that AI is not going to do. That is going to transform business, and then certainly on the HR uh, forefront. A lot of the other things that are talked about as HR trends, I think they're more event oriented, right? So the big debate now, remote versus hybrid versus on site. Okay, well, that'll all get flushed out. Um, and you know how whatever direction it goes, HR professionals just really need to be ready to adapt to whatever their organization chooses to do with
Mhm.
it. So I know that's a big topic for folks these days. And I think um, I think there's a big question around: is there enough talent? Is there enough? Is the talent ready to step into some bigger roles? And clearly, if you talk to CEOs, management and leadership is a big issue in their
Mhm.
mind, because, as I mentioned earlier, only 30% have had any kind of training, And a lot of management leadership training went away when COVID hit, and it just hasn't been reignited. So from an Evolve HR Solutions, we can find the talent. We have leadership and management development programs that can fill that gap to make sure that the organizations have the right leaders to take the organization into the future. We also have software that is really easy to implement and cost effective, that will help the organization meet the challenges and get some benefit from the automation while the technology continues to evolve.
That's great. Yeah, that's very insightful. It'll be very interesting to see how everything plays out, especially with AI. Well, I'm gonna. I maybe alluded to not having it, but we are definitely gonna put you through the ringer of the lightning round to get you on the other side of it. So, let's jump right into it. What's the favorite country that you've traveled to?
Oh, it's really hard to narrow it down. I love Ireland. I love Iceland. I love New Zealand. So those would be the three that I'd go back to in a heartbeat.
What's the best meal you've ever had in your life?
Oh, the best meal would be in Kyoto, Japan, at Yuzuya restaurant. It must have been like a 15-course meal. You were there too. You remember it. It was just absolutely amazing. I think I had to be rolled out because I just couldn't eat anymore.
Awesome. Yeah, it was delicious for sure. What's your favorite superhero?
Oh, my favorite superhero is a X-Men called Gambit. He doesn't have the, these great powers like Superman or some of the others. He charges objects that can then explode. But I always gravitated to those superheroes that had much more humanity to them, as opposed to the indestructible guys that are usually put up there as the best.
Mm-hmm. In your past, I remember you would scuba dive a lot, and that was a big hobby and passion of yours. Where's the best place that you've scuba dived?
I loved scuba diving in the Burma banks in off the coast of Thailand and Burma. And there's just some amazing coral reefs there. Did a liveaboard once, and we just traveled all around that ocean and saw some just amazing things, and even got to one location that Jacques Cousteau discovered. And so some places that weren't necessarily on the tourist spots.
That's great. If you had to describe your unique leadership puzzle piece, what would you say it is?
I think I have always desired to help my employees do great things, and so that's my superpower. That's my leadership puzzle pieces, is helping, seeing the good and the strengths and capabilities of my employees, and really being able to call that out to them, so that they could be more than they ever imagined they could be.
And then what would your team say is your unique leadership puzzle piece?
I think they would say that I build team community, set a vision that is bigger than themselves, that they want to follow. And so I think they would usually say that that was something that caused them to stick around.
Great. Well, that's the end of our lightning round. We still have some more questions from our audience that they've sent in, so we're going to move into those questions. We have about 4 or 5, so we'll keep them quick and able to be sent out easily. But just to jump into it, what's the biggest failure you've made in your career, and how has that shaped you to be the person and leader you are today?
My biggest failure was uh, I had moved into HR, running projects for HR, as I mentioned earlier, and there was one project that uh, I didn't think was a great project, but I was given it to be deliver it, and we were trying to automate a process, and um, we came into some technical difficulties. We were trying to do something that was really hard to do technically, and I, in my hubris, I was like, "Oh, we'll get through it. We can do it. We can do it. We can do it." And it came time to have a go no go decision, and I hadn't done any pre-staff to the executives who were sponsoring this program. And we get to this meeting, and I had to go, yeah, it's a no go, guys, and it really then set off a number of issues of, okay, Jeff, you needed to let them know that we were struggling, and not hide that. We eventually got the project done, but it cost us like $2 million more than it should have, and like 4 months longer. And uh, that really hit me hard from a confidence level.
Sure.
My confidence was shot, and so it took me a few months to actually get through that. And I was really fortunate that a good friend of mine who was on my team one night over some beers, he's like, "You got to snap out of it, Jeff. We need you back. In your true leadership capability if we're going to be able to be successful." And so it was, fortunately I had someone to shake me out of that. But it was the first big failure, and it almost took me
Wow.
out.
Yeah, thanks for being transparent about that. I know that's hard for people to admit a lot of times. If or sorry, how would you describe your leadership style, and how has it evolved to this place over your career? No pun intended.
I think my leadership style has always been very inclusive. As I said, from the get go, I I would go every day going, okay, my job is to make my employees successful, and I still believe that is my role. The how it's evolved is I'm much more situational than I might have been back then. Um, I hate giving bad news. I love giving good news, but you know, um, I'm not one of those that loves getting in there saying, "Hey, you really did a bad job." But it's one of those things that I've just had to learn to
Right.
do, and so I really try to set clear expectations up front, and then hold people accountable to that. But I still really try to respect people, and set a vision that gets people excited to get up each day and charge towards it. And so I think I've just honed it over the years.
What advice would you give your younger self prior to starting your career?
I think I would probably say, um, don't work so hard. Take time to for the family and friends, and enjoy the journey. Because you know uh, there's just going to be situations and scenarios where uh, companies aren't committed to the employees the way that they were 50 years ago, and so putting 100% of yourself into a company, it isn't they're not it's not gonna the entity of the company is not gonna care. It's the people
Hmm.
that care in the company, but the company's not.
Sure.
So I would say, hey, make sure you have that balance.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right. And our last question from the audience: how have you measured success in the various roles that you've had in your career?
Yeah, every role's slightly different from a success standpoint. When I was running um, accounts payable, It was reducing the cost per transaction down to $1 from $8. That was success when we accomplished that. When it was automating accounts payable on a global basis, it was getting a $20 million ROI. When But in a macro sense, it was always that title or position within an organization, and so there's always multiple layers from a success perspective, and from a career, I was able to achieve the chief talent officer role, and that was great. And now that I'm in my running my own company, the success looks completely different. It really what we're really trying to do is build a vibrant, value-added global organization that helps companies. And I measure success by being able to hire people and pay them good salaries and bonuses, and measure the success of the value that we're giving our clients. And so it's a completely different perspective from what success looks like. But I think ultimately success for me now comes down to am, have have I been a good friend? Have I helped those that are in front of me that need help? And have I lived a good life that is helpful and beneficial for others? And so that's kind of how I'm uh, looking at success
Right.
now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of this. This has been very insightful, and to hear all the wisdom from your career. And I know our audience is really gonna love it. So thanks for sharing.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Jeremy, for putting me on the hot seat. That was a lot of fun. And I'm really excited that next time the next episode will feature Dave Eaton, who is a principal at FMG Leading. He's going to be talking all about culture, and so you don't want to miss that. And in the meantime, it really helps us if you would like, subscribe, and share the podcast with all of your friends. So you can find us at The Leadership Puzzle on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll see you next time.